It is my pleasure to introduce Dame Wendy Hall. She's the Regis Professor of Computer Science, Associate Vice President and Director of the Web Science Institute at the University of Southampton, one of the first computer scientists to undertake serious research in multimedia and hypermedia. She has been at its forefront ever since. The influence of her work has been significant in many areas, including digital libraries, the development of the internet, and the emerging research discipline of web science. In 2017, Dame Wendy was co-chair of the UK government's AI review. She became a member of the AI Council and was appointed the first UK AI skills champion in 2018. She's currently an advisor to the UK government and many other governments and companies around the world. And in 2023 was appointed to the United Nations high-level advisory body on artificial intelligence. Her extensive experience and deep expertise make her perfectly placed to disentangle the myths and realities of generative AI for us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on then. Hey. God, it's so flat. Whoa. He just read that out. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Right, so that, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but the chap from the White House, is he here? No. He's gone. Right. That was a perfect lead into my talk, although I'm more China-friendly. Just saying. And actually, I was originally going to call the talk Fact or Fiction. I have to be careful. I've had a hip replacement, and I've also had 2 weeks of food poisoning, so I'm feeling a little weak. And so I might have to sit down. We'll see how it goes. I'd like to... So you can see the slides all right? Okay, good. I wanted to call it Fact or Fiction, and I think... because I want to take it beyond safety institutes. But what he said covered a lot of stuff, and I can whiz through, because I've got too many slides. So, here we go. Yeah, right. Is anyone else? I haven't been here, I'm sorry. I would have loved to attend the whole thing. Anyone else mention these Nobel Prizes? Yes. So I'm starting with these. These two are great scientists, whether they were Nobel Prizes in physics and chemistry, who knows? But both great scientists. And AI is just so like what everybody talks about all the time at the moment, and even the Nobel Prize Committee have got in on the act. So I'm going to come back to that right at the end of what I say. And just to remind people, I'm sure, this audience doesn't need to know. I always, we have, AI's been around a long time, and we've had several false starts along the way. I wrote my first prologue program in 1940. No, I'm not that old. 40 years ago. Still old, but not that old. And this was the winter in fact, oh, you haven't got the winter picture. This was the winter, in fact, when we lost Geoffrey Hinton to America and then Canada, because everyone said his artificial neural networks were rubbish and would never work. This is what happens in science. And I got so fed up with the last government when they said, well, all the research happens in industry. Yeah, it happens in industry after it comes out of the universities, right? So they forget that actually these people, that's why I put up the Hinton and Hassibas slides, these people were both products of UK universities. We're proud that they're UK universities, but they're products of universities. And as I said in the Guardian the other day, well, I think that was I don't want to go do this. That was my headline, right? Research professors, AI professors don't just fall out of trees. It takes a long time to grow an AI professor. And this is what I think a lot of governments, and actually the legacy we have in the UK, pro rata, the US per population, or pro rata size of population with the US and China, we produce more AI professors than either of them. And but we don't turn them into great companies. But we have a fantastic startup culture, and this legacy, people around the world are jealous of our legacy in this area. Anyway, right, back to we lost Geoffrey Hinton in this winter because they said his work was rubbish. So we had another winter in the 80s, remember? You won't remember these, but in the 90s rather, when there was so many people in universities doing work on neural networks. And of course, face recognition, speech recognition, video processing, all this stuff was bread and butter to research groups in the universities. Well, and as our speaker before said, governments just ignored it, except China, actually. They got on. But and then of course this is effectively, you know, DeepMind, and then when IBM beat the chess champion, and then DeepMind beat the Go champion. This is an old slide, there is, you know, we're now all trying to get to artificial general intelligence, and the question is, are we going to have another winter on the way, in a sense, because this revolution, which has so hit the headlines with the generative AI, could all go horribly wrong. And that's where I want to, I don't want to end on too much of a pessimistic note, but just a bit about my history. As in the introduction, thank you, I did the UK's 2017, I got a phone call from the Prime Minister, which was, who remembers who the Prime Minister was in 2017? It was Theresa May. I wonder if we asked ChatGPT if it would get the right answer. Anyway, I think she was looking for a distraction from Brexit. So anyway, long story short, it was the year in which the WEF and Klaus Schwab published the book Industry 4.0 that basically said governments that don't get AI are going to fail. So Jerome Pesenti and I got a phone call from Number 10 at the end of February saying, would we lead a review of AI that was all about economic growth? Well, there's a term we're hearing a lot of at the moment. If only they'd stuck to their guns and our plan, they might have worked. Anyway, because actually, as much as I love the Safety Institute, how does it help with economic growth? £100 million went into that. What is actually the return on investment for the UK taxpayer for that £100 million? We can come back to that if you want. I wish I had more time. Anyway, so the report recommendations were picked up by Greg Clark and the long-lost lamented Matthew Hancock, and we signed it off. It became a £1 billion sector deal. And this was before the AI, this was before the generative AI hype, okay? This is before COVID. Can you remember before COVID? This was 2017, 2018. At the time, it was just beginning, AI was beginning to hit government mindsets. And I can whiz through these now, because many governments started thinking about, first of all, ethical principles. So our House of Lords produced a really great report following up on ours, about the ethical principles in AI and how we should lead on them. The EU were already thinking about it, and Beijing published their first AI principles in this time frame, as did, there's now one from Saudi Arabia. They're, of course, putting billions into AI, and we hope they're going to be responsible about it. So then it became part of national strategies. I'm really whizzing through this just to sort of get the sense of how this all happened. The EU started their AI Act, which they're beginning to see the flaws in now. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have done it, and actually great, you know, good for them for doing it, but there's a lot of problems. When huge companies say they're not going to trade in Europe because of your regulation, you've got something wrong, haven't you? Again, Beijing started on its way of managing a regulation. Beijing's always ahead of us. If you've read my book, Four Internets, you will know that Beijing's ahead of us in terms of running the internet as well. If you don't mind not having free speech, the internet in China is a great place to be. Because there's much less crime and much less pressure in social media, because you can't say things that are nasty to each other, right? I mean, they got rid of Twitter overnight, or their version of Twitter, because they basically made it illegal for you to say something incorrect on the internet. So everybody stopped tweeting or stopped retweeting, right? That's how to do it, if you really want to do it. But we wouldn't want to live in that culture, would we? In that, you know, we wouldn't want to live in that authoritarian culture. So we pay the price now. We're paying the price for freedom, actually. I'll come back to that. So yeah, the EU, this is all before ChatGPT, right? Starting to talk about global agreements, the US, EU talking, and then, so now I can't read it on here. We're getting to, what's the date on that? Can you see that on the big screen? 20, I can't, if I turn around I'll get dizzy. Can you see a date on there? There is, right? Right. No, that's the, yeah. Right, there's a date there. I can see it now, 2019. This is it, right, 1984. Yeah. So this was ChatGPT 2. This was the version of GPT that OpenAI refused to publish because it was too dangerous. And then they changed their minds and published it because they decided it wasn't too dangerous. And this is when OpenAI was a not-for-profit, when Elon Musk had invested in it. Back in the, I was going to say the good old days, but no. This is the beginning of the journey to where we are in terms of generative AI today. The rise of the large language model. So having released GPT-2, despite initially saying it was too dangerous, they then launched GPT-3, saying it was, it's fine now. It's bigger and better and more intelligent, so it won't do anything. What? Dangerous? What? The rhetoric has changed so much, and at the same time, of course, people think China's behind in all this. It isn't. It has been up to speed, if not ahead, and their LLMs are, this is back in 22, 23, whenever it was, 22. Wu Dao was what it was first called. There are several LLMs. I mean, I know a very good company called Chipu, which is producing an LLM, which I think is a great company, and they're very interested in safety, but they do have to comply with the Chinese government in terms of what the content of what answers it gives to certain questions, like what happened in Tiananmen Square, those sorts of questions. Then the absolute game changer, of course, was, and I think Sam Altman will go down in history for, I'm not quite sure how yet, but he's certainly going to go down in history for something, because the marketing ploy of ChatGPT and getting everybody suddenly, whether you're the person on the street or the Prime Minister of the UK, interested in playing with this stuff that feels, so this is GPT-3 and then 4, it feels so much, it feels intelligent because it comes up with English or whatever language you trained it in. And all this stuff came out about, what happens if everybody uses it to write their essays, and there was and then Elon Musk's letter saying, we have to pause, this is all too dangerous, far too dangerous, too intelligent, we have to stop. Well, of course, we all know why he wanted them to stop, because he was no longer part of OpenAI and he wanted to launch his own company. But that was always mad, trying to say, the genie was out of the bottle, and ChatGPT had put it out on steroids. Meanwhile, the UK, in its own way, was doing its approach to regulation and took a pro-innovation approach, an anti-EU one, if you like, or an opposite to EU one. But we didn't, good white paper, but we didn't say who was going to actually coordinate all that. This government's going to fix that, I think. And then by this time, the tech bros were talking to the government. I've got 20 minutes left. Well, that's all right then. Thank you. Sorry. There was still money coming out. The review what I wrote, if you Walk on Wise fans, the review what I wrote had enabled the government to spend a lot of money on AI, on skills. I mean, you've got those of you in the university sector, the CDTs, the fellowships, the research hubs, all came out of that review in terms of money that government spent through UKRI. And the Rishi Sunak, when he government, they put 3.5 billion into hardware for the UK. This new government took that away again. That's how governments play with these things. We had the Innovate UK money. Southampton got 31 million for our responsible AI, but I should add we don't get all that money. It goes out, you can all bid for that funding. And so that was all through UKRI. And then the government announced a task force led by Ian Hogarth to spend £100 million to build and adopt the next generation of safe AI. Meanwhile, back in La La Land, Google feel under existential threat, so produced Bard, which was a miserable failure because it was too early. Right? They were forced to produce it too early. They went off and of course, a lot of the ideas that OpenAI was based on came from Google. But anyway, so they were and then, of course, we had the new Nobel Prize winner, Geoffrey Hinton, announced that all the work he'd done, he wanted to walk away from because it was dangerous. Oh, heavens above. How can you do that? But he wanted, I think, to be free of Google, actually, so he could talk about what was happening. We then had another letter from I can't read it now, I can't remember, the Centre for AI, can anyone read that? Safety, that's it, yes, I can't read it on this screen. Saying, actually we do, and this is signed, the top signatures there are Geoffrey Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, Demis Hassabis, Sam Altman, you know, the great and the good of this world, saying we have got to think about existential threats. Because this stuff is very dangerous, and we really want to get to AGI. Whatever AGI is, advanced general intelligence, i.e. machines that can think really like us, that's where we're trying to get to. So what we're building could go rogue, and all that argument about the existential threat, without really defining what AGI is, or what we do if we get there, or how we know if we got there, and is that really the world we want to be in? We don't know. Do we really want to run hell for leather, building systems that we don't have control of? Right, that's the ethical question I ask these companies. I'm not saying don't do the research, because we then get into the rhetoric which the tech bros have sold the world, or the governments anyway in the West, about the existential threat and the AI poses existential threat and risk to health of millions, experts warn. What? Well, I'll tell you how it might when I get to the end of my talk, but it isn't that it's going to go rogue and produce lots of new drugs that kill us all. And anyway, the potential, the benefits of this stuff, I don't want you to think I think this is bad stuff. This is amazing technology. It will have a profound effect on all of us in the world of work, in society, in health. It will enable us to do things we couldn't possibly have done before, as all the big tech revolutions do. And we have to be mindful and considered about how we use it. But in any other industry, can you think of any other industry? Perhaps you can, where companies can produce products that are untested, unevaluated. The consequences of the products have not been thought through, but they can reduce it overnight without anybody checking on it. You know, as the guy from the White House said, if you were in the pharma industry or the aircraft industry or car manufacturing industry, or you would have to go through a series of regulations and checks before you produced anything new. You couldn't, I mean, we do still, unfortunately, have some airplanes that fall out of the sky because of mistakes the companies make. But generally speaking, they're not going to release planes that are going to crash every 5 minutes because they haven't tested them properly. But in the computer industry, we can do that, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. We have to move faster on this whole issue of checking the companies and on regulating them and making sure they do the regulation, they do the testing, and then the governments regulate, that they test that or audit them to see they've done this, and they have to go through a series of hoops before they can release anything new. But with AI, it just doesn't work like that, because it doesn't seem to be working like that, because we all, of course, love this stuff. We eat it up, so they release it. This is what happened with the internet, too. We never succeeded in regulating the internet. And that's when you look back and you think the sort of work Tim Berners-Lee's trying to do today and what's happened with social media, we didn't think through the consequences of all that, the psychological effects on society and on kids. We didn't see them coming. And it's very hard with this technology, because until the masses use it, you can't see the consequences. They are like live experiments, right? It's not like building an aeroplane in that sense, because society is involved in the development of it all, because it's what we do with this stuff in AI as well as in the internet that actually makes the system grow. So it's very complicated to think about, but we do need to think about safety, but I think for different reasons. Then we had the Bletchley Summit announcement, which was the UK taking the lead, saying we're going to have a safety summit, effectively. They didn't call it that straight away, and we're only going to invite our friends. They did actually invite China, but an awful lot of countries were not invited. An awful lot of people were not invited. This was the government that didn't want academics involved. I got invited for a reason that was, I'll tell you about in a minute. But, and then at the same time as this, this was, again, the rhetoric was building up about how we had to worry about safety because of the existential threat. That AI could kill many humans within 2 years, warned Sunak advised. That was Matt Clifford, who was caught by the Times, and they said, well, when might the existential threat actually appear? What put a date to it? When might AI be clever enough to rise up and kill us all? And he said 2 years. I mean, it's a bit of a trip up. It's a very silly thing for him to say. People as old as me say, in my lifetime, because that's, I don't know how much I've got left, but it's maybe these things will happen in my life. Anyway, doesn't matter. And they set up the Hogarth task force. That's where the £100 million went. They got rid of the AI Council and other good stuff. Didn't want any academic advice anywhere about any of this stuff. It was all about putting the money into safety of foundation models, to be the world leader in that. And actually, it's turned out okay in some ways, but the premise was ill-founded. At the same time, look at that, absolutely the same time, Elon Musk announced, this is July 2023, Elon Musk announced XAI, completely male bald there, just pointing it out. And as we heard from the previous speaker, the Biden-Harris administration started talking to the companies about, well, you self-regulate, you will be fine. You look out, you just, like saying to the tobacco industry, yeah, self-regulate. China, of course, as he said, going down the Belt and Road approach, launching their version of AI, and as they have with the internet. And I give a whole other talk on the geopolitics of the internet, which shows that China is in control of over 50% of the world in that sense. So at this time, it had reached the United Nations level, and this was when the United Nations High-Level Advisory Board on AI was set up to work out what we could do to keep the world safe and to talk about global governance of AI that would benefit everybody and not just the rich West and Far East. And we had a timeline of 9 months, and China was included in this. This is what excited me about it. I was nominated by the UK government to be on this board. There were 39, so we didn't represent every country or every company. And my co-chair on the governance working group, which is the first working group I was involved with, was Yi Zheng from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, who manages somehow to straddle the line between being liked by the Chinese government and accepted by the Western scientific world and the US in particular. He's everywhere. And it was great. We're still working together. And it was great to work with him on the governance working group. This all happened at the same time. Rishi Sunak announced the UK AI Safety Institute, but declined to support the moratorium. That was the headline. This was all just before the summit. So it was everybody trying to get, I'm here, I'm leader, no, I'm leader, because as the chap from the White House said, what was his name? I keep calling him the chap from the White House. Anyway, I did see him on the programme. Saturday before the summit, Biden and Harris produced their executive order and announced their own safety institute. So this was allies being in competition. Here's my invitation to the summit because, and I put that up there because I should probably be able to sell this on eBay. These were rarities. There were hardly any professors invited to this. It was government policy wonks. That was a nice phrase. I suppose I'm a bit of a policy wonk these days, but anyway. And people from industry, because actually, this was this government saying, that's where all the research is, right? We don't need universities, we don't need academics, despite the fact that, of course, in our labs are the people doing the next generation of AI. It's just, will be 20 or 30 years away from commercialization. But I got invited, I assume, because I was on the United Nations High-Level Advisory Board. And the exciting thing was China was there. There's China with our minister and one of the vice presidents of China with our minister and the minister of the Department of Commerce from the States opening the summit. So it was better than I thought it was going to be, but it was so exclusive in terms of attendance. There were so many countries excluded, so many people excluded, so many bits of society excluded from the debate. The other thing that worries me, I've kept this slide in here, although I would put it at the end again, is that this was the tech bros taking over the conversation. You don't see any women in these pictures. Right, so we had people in the UK, we had a lot of senior women running the AI Council and being involved in AI governance as they did in the US, but the tech bro takeover changed all that. So the one on the left is the meeting with Rishi, that one is the meeting. They're all lining up to go in to talk to Biden at the White House. I do worry about that, and my mantra is if it's not diverse, it's not ethical. Think about that one. So I do worry that we have a monoculture leading this world. It's gone back to that, if you like, whereas we need the whole of society and across the world being involved in this debate, this discussion, this rollout. So we on the UN Commission, we produced an interim report last December, governing AI for humanity. We then it was incredibly hard work, great fun, very intense though. We met in New York in December last year, then in March in Geneva we went round to all the UN agencies who are all doing work on AI, particularly the ITU and the WHO and the Human Rights and the IP, all the agencies have a bit of AI in them now. And then we had over 20 certainly deep dives where we had a lot of experts come and talk to us about particular issues that we were considering putting into the report and recommendations. We met in May with a clash for the AI for Good Summit, which was a shame. I got this T-shirt from the visit to ITU. But we met in May to finalise our recommendations and signed off the report with a lot of writing, a lot of late night working to get the writing done, working with a brilliant secretariat. And then this was published finally in New York ahead of the United Nations General Assembly in September of this year, September the 19th. We were all in New York to help launch it. I would recommend you have a look at it. It's only 95 pages. The exec summary is 30-something. And it covers, we have 7 major recommendations covering common understanding. So we recommend the setting up of a scientific panel. Now, the UK already has a safety report, that Yoshua Bengio chairs, and the idea is that those sorts of reports that are coming out already would feed into this. So a bit like the climate science people have an annual state-of-the-art report. What's going on in AI? Have there been any near misses where things have gone horribly wrong? That sort of thing. And then a common ground, talking about a policy dialogue between governments across the world at sort of UN type level, and a standards exchange. Then a big bit on capacity building for the global south, i.e. the developing world, to make sure that everybody in the world can benefit from AI, be protected from its worst extravagances, and be able to have access to compute power and data sets, or training to develop their own data sets. And the concept is that there's a fund developed. I like the idea of it being called a CERN for AI, a virtual laboratory, whatever you want to call it, network of laboratories that the people with money and that's companies or the universities that already work in this area, donating time and compute power to help train and to help enable developing countries to have access to what they need to develop the use of AI in their world, in their culture. And this is not a patronising thing. That's not what it's about. Not getting into the situation that we are with climate change, where we, the West, say, well, thank you, we've had cheap energy for ages, look at what we've done with it, but you can't have that. Right? And we don't want to see that happening in AI. We recommended a global AI data framework for data exchange, and that the AI, this is the most contentious, that there's a small AI office to help manage all this, because each of the UN agencies wants to be that office. So they're currently working out how to manage that. This was us. This is just the beginning of the conversation. I'm very pleased to say we were very nervous about what the world would think. Generally speaking, it's been well accepted, and it got a unanimous vote finally, the United Nations on Sunday the 22nd, through the Global Digital Compact. So it's now being munged through the United Nations to see how those recommendations can be taken forward. And as I say, it's just the beginning. And I want to finish. How long have I got? 7 minutes, right, okay. I want to finish with some of the things that I can't talk too much. I haven't got time to talk about the things I'm excited about, because I am excited about this technology. And I love Azim Hazar. I read his blogs, and he wrote an excellent essay on why humanity needs AI. So please don't take my talk as being, we don't want this stuff. Actually, we need it. We'll be able to do things, as I say, we couldn't do before. We need to make sure it's safe and good for the whole of humanity. Now, some of the things that are now emerging are things like the research that shows these LLMs. I don't know if you've had any talks on this, but the research is showing that they have to hallucinate. The way they are trained, the way they're built, this generation of generative AI, they're trained to make things up if they don't know the answer. If you want to use it in earnest in your organisation, you have to use it and say, don't give me an answer unless you know it's true. But I'll come back to that in a minute, unless you know the answer, that sort of thing. So there's inherent flaws. We will get over this, right? But it's like saying, well, here's an aeroplane that can't, that actually has to crash every so often, right? Just because every so often this is going to happen. And is that acceptable, right? And we have to understand this stuff rather in this headlong rush to use it. We've also got problems, of course, with the copyright, the training, whose data, what data are they allowed to use to train the models? And again, this is different. If you're selling it to a company that's going to use their own data, then that's up to them how they manage it. But when you're talking about the whole world using stuff, and these big models being trained on the whole internet, then what rights do they have to use your data or the New York Times data or whoever it is? So we've got all these issues to deal with. So you hear people like, when I was talking about this with the research director at Google, he said, oh, don't worry, we're using synthetic data. Well, then you get the reports that say AI models collapse when trained on recursively generated data. Right, it's beginning to show that these models get worse and worse and worse. Right, as you do more with them, their performance gets worse. And then you have the, is it helping us write code? There's a big debate about some coders, it does write code. Is it good enough? Well, the coders say, yes, it's great for starting off, but you've still got to check it because it makes mistakes. Good for training, I guess, for students. And I love this. I follow Jan LeCun. I think he's, of the three that won the Turing Award, Hinton, LeCun, and Yoshua Bengio. Hinton's mad as no, I can't say that. I'm on record, aren't I? He's out there in terms of extrovertism. Joshua's the sort of steady, sensible one. Everyone wants Joshua to chair their committees. And Jan LeCun, who works for Meta, this is his, he says, these things are not intelligent, right? Don't confuse retrieval with reasoning. Don't confuse rote learning with understanding. Don't confuse accumulated knowledge with intelligence. Remember that when you're using this stuff. And I want to finish by considering something that really shocked me the other day. I was asked to do a lot of interviews when the Nobel Prizes were announced. And the reason, well, they had to come up with a way to give computer scientists a Nobel Prize. Okay? Because in Nobel's will, it is clearly listed what Nobel Prizes there will be. They have been created around economics along the way, but it is clearly stated in the will that there won't be a prize for mathematics. And I was brought up as a pure mathematician that the reason was that Nobel hated mathematicians because his partner, girlfriend, wife, whatever, had an affair with a famous maths professor. Now, this is, I was trying to quickly do a search on was this true or not for the media interview. So I've typed into Google, where I go for my answers, something like, why is there no Nobel Prize in mathematics? And I think I added the word affair or mathematician's affair with mathematician or something. And this is the answer it came back with. Basically, there's no evidence to say he had an affair. Actually, he had a wife who had an affair with this mathematician, whose name was Mittag Leffler, because he wasn't married, but he could have had a girlfriend, right? And there's no evidence to say that he didn't have a partner or girlfriend who had an affair with. He clearly had a run-in with Mittag Leffler, I think. And we have to wait for the historians to work through as to what happened. But he hated mathematicians. He also, like my husband's a physicist, and he doesn't rate mathematics at all. He thinks it's just a tool for other sciences to use. And I think that was Nobel's prize. Nobel's view as well. He just didn't like mathematicians. So there's no prize for mathematics. And of course, initially computer science came out of mathematics. So I agree with all that. So this AI overview that comes up on Google now before the links says clearly it lists the prizes for the Nobel Prizes, the subjects. And then it says, Mariam Mirza, I can't pronounce her name, sorry, Mariam Mirzakhani, became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize in mathematics. Why has it put that there? And something to do with the fact that I talked about Nobel's wife, I suppose. Now, she actually, I know her, any mathematicians here, she was the first woman to win the Fields Medal for mathematics, which was created by the mathematicians because there was no Nobel Prize for mathematics. And we computer scientists created the Turing Award. The ACM runs a £1 million a year Turing Award, which is because there's no Nobel Prize in, and all, Demis hasn't won it yet, but Jeff Hinton won the Turing Award. So that's incorrect, factually incorrect. It has contradicted itself. How do we correct that? That fact is now on the internet and will be used because, I don't know, do they actually use the answers to the queries we put in? Do they use them for future training? I don't know for sure. But this sort of stuff is being produced billions of times a day. No one's checking it. My argument is my biggest worry about this stuff is that we've got to worry about the internet becoming a toxic swamp. And what we're actually doing with this stuff is destroying our information ecosystem. Because I used to go to Google. I know I still get the links on Google. I know, therefore, that when I follow those, I know the provenance of where the information is coming from. But there's so much being produced now that is incorrect, that's going back into the system. And two things here, and this is my last slide before you put up the nought. One is you've got a talk from Sandra Watcher later. Her team's paper, Do Large Language Models Have a Legal Duty to Tell the Truth? This was published in the journal I edit, which I'm very pleased, the journal Royal Society of Open Science. It's a really great paper asking the question of if you spot, who is responsible for this rubbish that is going onto the internet? Who's responsible for cleaning it up? And actually, I keep coming back to the only salvation we've got at the moment is Wikipedia, because you may argue that there's bias in some of the editors and it's flawed, but actually it has an amazing governance model. You can see who's written what, who's edited what. It's very, can we make that model scale? But anyway, if any of you bright young people here can think of a way to stop the internet becoming a toxic swamp, because I really would like to know, because I am so worried about that. Thank you.